Rockaways Productions presents The Casey Waters Show, Episode 241, The Monster. Hello, I'm your host, Casey Waters. Tonight I will continue with the answer to the question. Here I look at what would happen if people in power were no longer able to deceive the masses. Then it's on to the monster. Here I look at the relationship of the church and politics, and how politics and religion sometimes don't always go hand in hand. Tonight's show will feature background footage from Big Piney Trail in Black Mountain. Well, it's rather in Montreat, just north of Black Mountain. Then I also have footage from another trail, a suburban trail in Baltimore, Maryland. Recently I went there to visit my sister. My mom and my other sister came along too. One of my other sisters came down from New Jersey. We had the whole family together. What a celebration. My mom just turned 88 years old. Happy birthday, Mom. So, now let's continue with the answer to the question. The West Side allows deception and uses it often to advance one's personal gains. For instance, a West Side person would deceive coworkers in order to secure a promotion, where an East Side person would think that was just horrible to do something like that. A West Side person would seek someone who looks nice and someone who makes a lot of money to be their life partner, even though they might not like their personalities and values much. Well, anyway, that's how it goes. Usually the East Side can be recognized because they hate deception, and the West Side can be recognized because deception is permitted. They don't brag about it, but you'll just see that it's permitted and notice it. Well, if you're perceptive. But anyway, so the West Side is deceptive, but the East Side isn't. So, how do you know when the East Side becomes dominant? What's the answer to the question? Well, the answer is kind of interesting. For the West Side might like you to think the East Side became dominant, and there might be deceptive ways of doing this. But when the East Side really becomes dominant, and it's the real East Side, the largest imaginary territory, the most popular one, well, you'll know. Here's how. Because suddenly you'll be told, even if you can't understand the concepts, you will be educated until you can understand that you, regardless of your age or intellectual capability, can check for deception. That is, on anyone doing anything, especially if it relates to a position of power or influence. You'll be able to check anyone if they have been deceiving other people. Sure, you would be able to verify their activities, and you would be able to inquire into anyone or anything. Well, actually, it sounds really Big Brother. But perhaps you don't understand This is turning Big Brother on Big Brother. So that's how you eliminate Big Brother, by allowing everybody to be Big Brother and everybody to have access to information about anyone. Well, it's more than surveillance. We're talking about surveillance of mind. This is something quite futuristic. As I said, anyone could find out if anyone's deceiving anyone. Well, once someone's discovered that they have been deceiving, well, all the people who have been deceived or who are affected by the deception are instantly notified. So such a person who is deceitful, well, if they like to deceive, it would be hard for him or her to hold a position of power for very long. So, it's a matter of checking and verifying deception and being able to inquire into anyone or any situation so you know what's really going on, so you can understand the subtleties and complexities of deception and how power grabbing occurs and why people are motivated to do what they do. Then you could truly have the best people in the positions of power. Once this happens, how do you know when the East Side becomes dominant? Because you could feel the authority and the love of the East Side instantly. It kind of blows you away. It's quite intense and wonderful. Then, also another symptom of the East Side becoming dominant is people of authority will be converted to the East Side. See, this is how it works. How can he turn Big Brother on himself? Well, you have a power tool of sorts. This is the ultimate power tool. This tool could rule over military machinery. This tool can stop anyone from doing anything. It's basically like the power of God. But it's placed in the hands of the meek and the ignorant and the elderly and the children and the women. All the people who deceive don't want to have power suddenly do have power and knowledge, and they have power to stop people who are taking advantage of others from fulfilling their plans. That kind of power a tool. So what it is anyone who deceives, anyone who tries to manipulate the data of this power tool, which also has infinite knowledge. So it has infinite knowledge basically about everyone and infinite power. And if someone tries to deceive it, tries to alter how it works or alter the information base, well, why that person did it and what they tried to do is instantly reported to all those affected. So that's how people in authority are converted to the East Side. Get it? They don't have a choice. Now, what makes them not have a choice? Well, this imaginary power tool, where the power of God is placed into the hands of the meek. And suddenly anyone could have, well, basically infinite knowledge at their disposal. Have people be able to explain it to them till they understand everything relevant in a nice, quick, and efficient way. And they'll have the authority to decide what should be done with deceptive people. Their vote will be pooled in an honest way with all the other relevant people being forced to vote on important issues. So the numbers really weigh in. where the people being deceived can outvote the people who are deceiving. Anyway, well, when will such thing happen? When will such a power tool, such a machine or technique or situation be available where the meek have all this information and power to overthrow the deceptors? Well, when will it happen? Of course, it could happen relatively soon if we're lucky, but of course, there's a good chance it won't happen for quite a long time, unfortunately. But that's okay. For the ideas of the East Side, the ideas of non deception, and the ideas that I just spoke about won't die with my episode dying and fading into oblivion, and won't die with me. No, they'll live on. They'll rise up arbitrarily in people's mind and become an idea once again. For as long as people are oppressed and deceived, the East Side will be in the background, lurking in the minds of people who are being oppressed, and the people who are being deceived will realize these concepts of truth and honesty, and that the deceivers shouldn't be the ones in power. And eventually, some way, somehow, they'll make an enduring mark where they can rewrite history and expose what really happened, how everyone was really deceived, and how their power was taken away from them so long. And the East Side could rule with the authority of God, a true golden age, a true utopian situation. When will it happen? Well, perhaps not for a long time. Oh well. I hope you have enjoyed this section of The Casey Waters Show. Now it is time for The Monster. Here I look at the relationships of politics and religion. How sometimes they get along, well, sometimes to the detriment of many people, and sometimes they don't get along. Also, I look at the relationship of the church and the people who attend the church. Well, this section may be a little controversial to some people, sure, as they take a little more of a Gnostic, independent, liberal slant to Christianity. The side of Christianity that's often not heard. But anyway, so let's move along. Politics and religion. Well, separation of church and state. Sure, it's a good idea, but if you look at history, typically that's not the case, with the government influencing religion and religion influencing the government. Sure. So, how does this all work? Well, a lot of times, religious morality that is being purported at the time, the popular religious morality, might shape the political landscape. An example of this might be the neoconservative movement that arose in the late 1970s and early 1980s in response to abortion. Also, there is other ways that politics and religion affect each other. Often, war might be waged for religious reasons, and so on. Of course, sometimes this relationship is beneficial, where the church might cause positive political change. But it is really a mixed bag, and it is a situation that is, well, often difficult to control. Well, difficult to control if you're an individual who doesn't have much influence. If you're just a commoner and not, a high ranking government official or high ranking religious official. If you're really low down on the totem pole, then how are you going to have your voice heard? Well, sometimes it's really difficult, of course. And sometimes politics and religion, they don't work together. And sometimes the government has to, limit the religion. An example of this might be the formation of Italy, where Italy formed in part to reaction to the Vatican, to the Roman Catholic Church having too much power, too much taxing authority, too much power not just over Italy, but over the whole region. Gradually, their power shrank, and eventually, their area of at least immediate total influence was limited to the Vatican itself, only a portion of Rome, where before they had influence over all of Italy and beyond. So their influence was reduced because the people rose up against the church and decided that the Catholic Church just had a little too much power. Well, guess what? I went to a Christian school, Christian private school growing up. So guess what I learned when Italy became a country? Well, it wasn't in grade school or high school. Unfortunately, not even in college or beyond. It wasn't until just a couple years ago, watching it on the History Channel. So, there's many stories like this, I'm sure, out there, of people being oppressed by Christianity. It happened in Hawaii with local religious customs being discouraged in the late 1800s and early 1900s. It probably happened, obviously, to the Native Americans. Their culture and religion was crushed, typically in the name of Christianity. So, Steppenwolf describes this, at least in part, in the song entitled Monster, Suicide, America. It's a song with 3 names. Anyway, so I adopted the Munster name, and that's the inspiration for the Munster, the title of this section. Later on, I'll actually read you the lyrics, but let's move along to other things first. Well, sometimes morality can be a little murky. Things aren't always as crystal clear as the local preacher might like them to be. Sometimes morality is a little hazy, a little hard to decide what really is right and what really is the will of God. So, with the will of God sometimes being hard to discern, well, in these cases, the preacher could sway the crowd and change their opinion. And perhaps in different countries, in different times, in different situations, but looking at the same murky morality issue, the crowd could be swayed either way and could take on either opinion and actually have opposing opinions. Sure. So things aren't always easy to decide. I mean, there was a little bit of a cozy relationship between the Roman Catholic Church and the Nazis things are a little murky there. And perhaps even the church might have had some role in oppressing rights of black people, back in the 1800s and whatnot. Who knows? But I suspect it might be the case. Of course, the black church, helped the black community gain power in the civil rights movement. So it could work both ways. Sometimes the church creates a positive change, and sometimes it creates a negative change, or keeps a negative situation going longer. Because sometimes it's hard to say, with complicated issues such as racism, or homosexuality, or abortion, where the absolute truth lies. How far are you willing to take an idea or a principle? How far are you willing to go with oppression and limiting people's rights in the name of morality? It's a tough issue. Sometimes a hard stance is warranted. Sometimes a softer approach is better. And for most issues, there's probably, conflicting opinions. Thus, the heart of the will of God is hard to decide. Because sometimes we don't know where the issue lies in our hearts. So, finding the will of God can be difficult. Sometimes it's hard to say what the will of God is. Well, that's just the way it goes. And a lot of times there's conflicting opinions. As I said, the preacher could often sway the crowd either way on the same issue, perhaps in different times, in different situations. But still, morality can be murky. Also, sometimes organized religion will encourage war, which just isn't right. It's not what Jesus would do. Sometimes organized religion discourages war, which is great. And sometimes organized religion encourages the concentration of wealth, where very few people have the money and the power, and the rest of society, is forced to work hard and have limited rights and limited privileges. This is not right, but this is an example of politics and religion working together, to take power and money away from the common man, and perhaps send the poor to war, the poor fighting the rich man's battle. Sure, it's often the case, unfortunately. And as I said, religion often plays a hand in it. Sometimes the war is, in part over religion itself. Even different sects of Christianity fighting each other, as an example, as in the Irish Civil War. But anyway, so, with a lot of things going on, Protestants versus Catholics in Ireland, or different sects of Muslims fighting today in Syria in 2013, and the conflict in Syria with the different sects of Muslim might be spreading to other countries as well. So things are a little complicated, and often it is hard to decide where to take your stand, or whether just to leave things alone. We have to gain as much information as we can. Organized religion, of course, is often used to oppress other religions. And so, Is that right? What makes one religion better than another anyway? Is it God given right? Is it the God given rights of Christians to oppose other religions and oppress them and limit their influence and even take away the practices of that religion from the children of people of that religion? Christian missionaries probably have done that oftentimes in Africa and Hawaii and other places. It's unfortunate as one tries to spread the gospel, one might be taking away the culture and religion of a society. It's hard to say what is right. Sometimes we just need to step back and take a look at what we're doing. And this isn't just Christianity, of course. All these problems I'm describing, I'm sure, apply to Islam and Buddhism and whatnot. I'm just not as familiar with their histories, so it's hard to pull examples out of the air that everyone is familiar with. So I guess that's why I'm picking on the Christians, because most people are familiar with their examples, at least in this country. Examples of Christian oppression and whatnot, and where Christian influence didn't always work the right way. As I said, it happens in Buddhism, Islam, Hinduism, etc. Any organized religion. Then what are you to do? Well, can't we think about it? Think it to yourself. Perhaps not discussing it with anyone at first. But is there a Gnostic approach where you could be in touch with the Lord and be in touch with God directly, thus knowing God's will directly? Can you be independent? Can you learn more about culture and government and other issues so you can make more intelligent decisions? Perhaps a more analytical approach is warranted. All of this can really work to help solve some of the problems of organized religion. Now, finally, it's time for The Monster. The Monster by Steppenwolf. Well, Monster, Suicide, America is the real name of the song, if I'm not mistaken. So, Steppenwolf, I guess, wrote this song in the late 60s. Anyway, it's a wonderful song, sang beautifully, and played well, with lots of nice electronic guitar riffs. But the lyrics, just themselves, are beautiful, or at least somewhat, and address a lot of the issues I just discussed. So, this is The Monster by Steppenwolf. Once the religious, the hunted and weary, chasing the promise of freedom and hope, came to this country to build a new vision, far from the reaches of kingdom and pope. Like good Christians, some would burn the witches. Later, some got slaves to gather riches. But still, from near and far, to seek America, they came by thousands to court the wild. But she just patiently smiled and bore a child to be their spirit and guiding light. And once the ties with the crown had been broken. Casey Waters Show. Producer, Casey Waters. Graphic editing, Judson Laird. Please note our new email address, caseywaters2@caseywaters.com.